Declining to include ecological costs in national income accounts and corporate financial statements is every bit as misleading, and I believe even more guaranteed to produce a catastrophe as surreptitiously shifting debts to offshore corporations in the Cayman Islands. Costs are costs, and sooner or later the paper has to be paid, or Mother Nature will come and break our kneecaps. As with bubble economies, the greater the violation of what economic modelers call the boundary conditions, what in this context biologists call carrying capacity, the sharper and deeper the eventual collapse will be. So let me bluntly state a stark fact. 20th century America is not sustainable in anything like its current form, and it cannot be broadly replicated. We simply don't have the resources, and we don't have the absorptive capacity for the pollutants in this world. We would need for America to be, depending upon how you do your calculations, anywhere from 4 to 12 additional planets just like ours to carry 6.5 billion people leading an American lifestyle. The classic example, last year, the 4% of the world's population in America consumed 43% of the world's gasoline. How sustainable is that? How many wars are we prepared to fight in order to maintain that? We can drill off of every coast, we can drill in the Alaskan Wildlife Refuge till the caribou come home, and maybe we should, just to get rid of that argument, but there's no reason that we should destroy Nigeria and Indonesia's environment just to fill our cars while we leave our own treasures pristine. But even the highest, craziest estimates, the ones that every academic geologist thinks are out to lunch, of what oil might be ultimately recoverable, just wouldn't make a noticeable difference in the world's oil markets. You add in those highest estimates to what is currently out there, and you're talking about affecting it 0.5% to 2/3%. It would not touch price. Everyone in the world is addicted to oil, and there's no one down there making more oil. So what conclusion should we draw from all of this? I've learned over the years that I should, when I'm ranting like this, somewhere in the course of the remarks say something that refers to the word conclusion. Say, so in conclusion, it gives the audience hope. I would conclude that if the whole world is ever to enjoy prosperity, we need a fundamentally different model of what prosperity means. A guy at a conference asked me last month how to persuade someone. He actually asked me how to persuade Al Gore, as it turns out, that a smaller, simpler, more elegant, much more carbon-efficient home would be a more attractive place to live than a supersized McMansion. How do you convince people to make that sort of change? And my off-the-cuff answer, which when I later thought about it, I sort of liked, was that we need to create a culture of prestige for voluntary simplicity. I talked about how the Prius succeeded while the Ford Fiesta sunk, because the Prius says, I'm cool, while the Fiesta says, anyone who drives me is a loser. Detroit has been telling us since 1973 that it can't sell cars that save gasoline, but what it really couldn't sell were junky little rattle traps. Toyota severed the relationship between size and quality. It made a very high quality, small car with the most advanced drivetrain in the world, and with every creature comfort you can imagine. My daughter, when she drives around in her more recent one than my model, will say something like Chinese restaurant, and it pops up on her screen showing where her car is on the city grid and the 4 closest Chinese restaurants. The car is at least as smart as I am. What Toyota did was to change the concept of what efficiency means, and as a result, it is having enormous difficulty trying to deliver enough high-quality hybrids to meet demand. In a fundamental sense, quality is part of what sustainability is all about. I learned this morning that the average retail store has a life expectancy of under 15 years, whereas the average residence, for example, has a expected lifespan of more than 100 years. Retail is about creating throughput, and it tends to have very high discount rates that make the value of something 15 years from now essentially zero. It's the opposite of sustainability. It focuses on flash and fashionability rather than upon enduring quality. And quality is why firms like GSBS operate at the very core of what a sustainable future needs. It is technically possible to envision a very attractive world in which every building goes beyond the requirements of LEED Platinum, and they all interact with their neighbors in self-reliant urban villages, where all energy is derived from renewable sources, solar, wind, hydro, and the planet's most underappreciated baseload source, geothermal, where telecommunications will have replaced much transportation and high-speed electrified railroads carry most intercity passengers who are going 300 miles or less. You'd never think of hopping on a plane to get from Tokyo to Osaka. Everybody jumps on a bullet train. It's a world in which all cars will become serial plug-in hybrids like the soon-to-arrive Chevy Volt, when the liquid-fueled engine operates only to recharge the batteries, and the batteries themselves become a significant source of standby distributed electricity for the grid. Let me deconstruct that for just a second, because that might have whizzed past some of you. I served on the board of a company that just got absorbed by another company, or acquired by another company last week, that makes an element that describes that. Let's say we got 100 million automobiles in garages all over the country, and they all have these very large battery packs in them, and they can then be used to run for the first, and fill in the blank, 60, 70, 80 miles, purely on batteries, and then when the engines click on, they exist only to recharge the batteries. The entire car is an electric car with a backup recharger aboard it. One nice thing about that is that that engine, because it doesn't have to start and stop, it doesn't have to accelerate. The electric motors do all of that super efficiently. It just starts up, operates at a single constant speed right at the peak of the power cycle. Its pollution is much easier to control because it doesn't have all of that stuff, and its fuel efficiency is perfect because it gets as much power per unit of fuel consumed as possible. Since I'm talking about board service, served on a board of a company that manufactured those cars in the early 1980s. We manufactured a total of 5 before we went bankrupt, but the idea is basically sound, and Chevrolet is bringing considerably more resources to it than we did. So the new company has this little device that sits between the car and the outlet that you plug into, and it's in constant communication with the grid operator for your electrical system. And when you plug in the car, you hit a couple little things on something that's very much like an iPod that says, if you, the grid, are selling electricity at 6 cents a kilowatt hour or less, I'm buying. If you're buying at 18 cents a kilowatt hour or more, I'm selling, and leave enough power in my batteries to let me go 25 miles tomorrow. Pretty simple. And it's real-world competition, and it's instantly available power that can flow either direction. And the neat thing is it is what people in the electric business call spinning reserves. It's the most pricey, valuable power out there. It's the power that they have to constantly have spinning in a dynamo someplace in order to take care of power surges and things somewhere out there in the grid. Here, it's just sitting inertly in a chemical battery.